We are going to be talking about something quite exciting today, kind of getting an insider talk to Pepsi and Co. So with that, Haley, do you want to take a quick moment and introduce yourself?
So, hello everybody. I am Hayley Shore. As said, I am a design manager at PepsiCo, currently based in London, but I've had quite a journey within PepsiCo to get to London in the first place. So, kind of to start off, before all of PepsiCo experience that I've had, I did start out in New York City in the agency side of the design world. That was after graduating at FIT in the packaging and branding design program. So, as I mentioned, first kind of couple years of my career was in agency, working with a huge range of different kind of industries and products, everything from branding tampons, dog food. Again, in the agency world, I got that kind of big scope of challenges really as a junior designer, which kind of helped me shape my portfolio and my resume, which I thought I wanted to go off and just travel the world and be a freelance designer with. But unexpectedly had a job opportunity brought to me from PepsiCo based in New York. At the very first interview, I thought to myself, this isn't me. I don't want to work for a big corporation. Like, I don't want to be tied down in New York City, even though I love New York City, don't get me wrong. Thinking I would just stick it out for a year, kind of put it down on my list of experiences and maybe continue in my freelance kind of world. But a year in, I found it to be such a different kind of landscape than I expected. It is a massive corporation. It's the number one foods company in the world. I found it to be such a different environment than I expected. It is very much run like an agency kind of mentality. We're almost a startup, or we were a bit more like a startup at the early days of design within PepsiCo, where we were just pitching how we worked within the business and why design should have a seat at the table. So that was a really exciting opportunity that I kind of didn't expect. My probably biggest step in my career was helping to move our global headquarters for design to Ireland. I was the only designer that took the role. So there were loads of marketers, kind of different industries within PepsiCo, all moving from different countries to Dublin. But I was the only person in design. So not only did I have to do my job of branding and packaging and all of that knowledge that I had, but I also had to help design the office. And just as I was kind of getting comfortable in Dublin, thinking this is now starting to work for me, like got the lay of the land, a little bit of the cultural understanding. And they then offered me a move to London to do something quite similar. That is where I sit now. And I would say that my skill set has very much grown from just being a branding designer to now being sort of a people manager. And I've started new pipelines within the business, such as sustainable merchandise that we create, like all the lovely Pepsi t-shirts and bags and hats and things that you might see. So I now do that for all of our brands, kind of globally. Now our role in UK has actually expanded to where we're doing a lot of global design for all of our brands around the world. So it's just been a constant sort of change and evolving job role that I've had, which has kind of amounted to almost 10 years now within PepsiCo. And that is where I currently am. I mean, the industry has changed so much. In the past 3 years, I've seen such a massive shift within AI. However, I will say first that some of the basic branding and 360, when I say 360 skills, that means like thinking about a brand from all aspects, how it walks, talks, behaves, who you're trying to target. Those things are still kind of the ground basics that I think any branding design job would look for. So I'd say in terms of when you're applying for jobs or trying to figure out what to showcase in your portfolio, I think it's really about showing your kind of travel of thought from the inception of an idea and strategically why you've thought that idea, or maybe a few different ideas, but why you've selected and honed in on one area. And then showing how you build that out, not just in one way, not just the packaging design itself or a store design itself, but kind of the whole 360 of how a brand can live and breathe. Now, here's how we might activate in a brand collaboration. Here's how we might show up in a unexpected clothing store, even though we're a beverage brand. Here's how we kind of should be seen through our consumers' eyes in so many different realms. And I think that as time has gone on and as my career has progressed, I'm just seeing that expand more and more. It's like, how do you look on a t-shirt? What's your color palette when you kind of would design a collection of clothing? Sounds crazy, but I mean, for beverage brands, which is my kind of specialty, like we are hardly even designing the packaging. We're designing everything around it. And so I think that that sort of 360 thinking is probably the biggest skill that most companies would look for. Usually three overarching principles for that brand would be, and linking that back to who the consumer is that you're trying to target. I think always having a bit of that strategy at the front is something that we do in every single project we do now for design, is like, who are we talking to, what do they
Right.
like, and then what are those principles we always want to hit when we're designing for them, how we brand our brands.
Okay.
So for example, Pepsi might be unapologetic, bold, and have a wink in the eye is something that we always say. It's got a bit
Mm.
of cheek. In the UK, that would be a word that we use for Pepsi. It's cheeky. So it's always got that little like unexpected quality to it.
Mhm.
But we would always kind of tee up anything we've designed to make sure it's hitting those 3 points. So I would say, especially for brands and in the consumer packaged world, I think human centricity, really thinking about your consumer, is key. And then, again, kind of building that strategy around the human centric kind of behavior a brand should have. It's just expanding on kind of what we were saying, is like, why have you made it purple? Like, why is purple relevant? It's kind of deep diving into each of those aspects. I'd say that the types of designers that we always look for are people that do kind of have that expanded thought when they present their work to us. One of my favorite hires that I had, I always like to use her as an example because there was this whole wall of portfolios. I mean, massive auditorium of portfolios. And this one designer not only had her poster of all of her work in front of us, but she had built a chair and she had carved the branding into this wooden chair, and it was for Heineken. It was a theoretical kind of brand design, but her whole tagline just said hi. But then she took that train of thought and like literally built something physical out of that. And
Mm.
to me, I was like, if this girl can build a chair and do something unexpected that caught our eye like that, then I mean, she could probably crack anything we throw at her. So, I mean, quite literally, that expansion of thought into something physical just really
Mhm.
stood out. And so I think it kind of links into this idea of showing that you've got curiosity, and even if you can't do something perfectly, you're willing to kind of explore that or push something outside of the box. It sounds crazy, but just throwing things at the wall and then not being afraid to kind of show that and back why you thought that. Um,
Mm.
I think another thing that's really important, especially in big companies, is being insights driven. So, another example of a great project we saw in a portfolio, and we ended up hiring this person, was a project for McDonald's. And it was a theoretical campaign, but she used a statistic she'd found that was about, I think, like 56% of UK teens go to McDonald's for a first date or something like that.
Oh, wow. Funny,
And
yeah.
it was just something you wouldn't know. But then she
Mhm.
based her whole project around that insight. And that kind of connection between an insight that happens in consumer behavior through
Right.
to then her project. Her project wasn't even visually that great, if I'm honest, but it was
Okay.
that thinking and that train of thought that we saw. And we were like, that would really apply in this kind of industry. So I
Yeah.
think using insights is a big tool that I think often you don't think to use in school.
Okay.
But if you can find an insight and ground your work in something like that, it really elevates it. I would say within each project, having some continuity. So even though your packaging design or your product that you're displaying might have a sense of design to it, kind of using that same design and expanding the world of that design so that every single page for that project has the same background and border and details on the edges of the pages, and the typeface on the bottom, even if it's just your numbers of the pages, kind of matches to that
Mhm.
project. I feel like that kind of continuity is something that really elevates kind of a portfolio look and feel. I think even just if you are kind of designing a online platform for your space, like having that whole project sit within a branded space and not just on a white background sometimes really elevates.
Mm.
So again, it's kind of pushing your one thing into a whole world that you might step into. I feel like I hire a little bit less for like the detail skills when I'm looking at portfolios. Of course,
Mm.
things need to be crafted and considered, but I do think that personally, I tend to look for the strategic thinking and the storytelling, as you said before, more than everything else. Framing each project in a way of here is the first insight, or here is my first statement that sparked
Mhm.
the thought for this project. And then the next page being, here's what that thought led to. And here's the consumer that we're targeting, kind of like staging everything in that way, where you step through the
Mhm.
thought process, really helps,
Mhm.
as opposed to just jumping straight into the visuals. That's a tough one. I would say I probably wouldn't have 10 projects. I
Okay.
I think I would keep it down to 5.
Okay.
Again, in this whole storytelling and world building kind of way, I would say I would expand on a few rather than show loads,
Okay.
and make sure that they each kind of had everything fleshed out from the absolute very start idea
Mhm.
to kind of the finished product. Um, it's a great tough question because I have not had to build a portfolio in quite a while. And you're very right that mine was very different at the start. I actually built mine from wood and stained my wood, built it with materials. But I would say if you're digital focused, and that's the space that you want to play in, build it digitally and build in aspects like animation, and have something interesting that like draws people in digitally.
Yeah.
Or if you're like myself and I want to go down that more tactical or tangible sort of realm,
Mhm.
I would want to use materials and kind of build it out in a physical space. Adding something unexpected into the portfolio is always a good idea, whether that's
Yeah.
something digitally or if that's something physically. I do think within a portfolio, if there's an opportunity to add in something about a brand partnership,
Mm.
um, that's a really big one. I think more and more brands are doing things with other brands than they ever used to. So, like I mentioned before, like beverage brands will now be doing like rings and jewelry. So, finding an interesting angle to say, we think Gatorade should pair with Lululemon, throwing something out there.
Yeah.
And then showing what that could look like if you collaborated with another brand, and like what a Lululemon event could be that's sponsored by Gatorade. Like throwing something in there that shows how two brands come in together, I think is a really strong piece to add in, because that is something that I do look for in portfolios. When I'm, scanning loads and loads, I'm like, oh, a brand partnership just takes a lot of extra thought, I think,
Mhm.
because you're bringing two different worlds together into one, which shows a lot of, branding skill, in my opinion. Hmm. It's a good question. I do remember back in the day, and I think this would still apply. I actually threw in a lot of my extracurriculars into my
Mhm.
resume.
Okay.
So I coach figure skating, for example. And even though that's not totally related to design, I felt that building an ice rink was actually a big skill that I had, because that was something I've done in my past. And like,
Yeah.
even though that's not a design job that I had, it was a job that helped me kind of curate certain skills or build a skill set that might be helpful within a team dynamic. So I think even in interviewing and talking through your past experiences in that way can be helpful, um,
Okay.
if you don't have loads and loads of experience to kind of talk to on paper. Potentially, I mean, I think working in a retail environment, especially, can really help with like understanding human behavior
Mhm.
and knowing how a space is merchandised. I mean, quite literally, a retail space has a lot of design thought that goes into it. And even just working in that environment, you see how consumers behave. So, understanding that can translate into design knowledge in a
Mhm.
way.
And I think one of my most impactful experiences in the graphic design world, and that really shaped my view of graphic design, is I've lived with graphic designers from every continent. And having someone, let's say, from Lagos and how they're going to design versus someone from Germany and how they're going to design, or someone from like Korea. Like I've been able to see these kind of different intricacies of design and what speaks to those people, and that can really inform based off you're doing global projects or local and bring something new to the mix. I would say some things that are really good to look out for if you're in high school or university. Definitely joining a graphic design club on campus. Um, being a freelance graphic designer. I think volunteering as a graphic designer, like if you're a part of a local community center, whether it's, I don't know, like a horse rescue and they need posters for a fundraiser, or your local like community centers, etc. That was something I did that allowed me to put graphic design on my resume before ever leaving my university, ever leaving my high school even. I would say like apply for whatever awards you can. If there's like design competitions, do them. The worst comes to worst is you don't get it. Best comes to best, you do get it. All right, everyone. Well, it was such a pleasure speaking with all of you today. Thank you so much, Haley. If you with that, then I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye.